there any relevance of native speaker norms? That's a question for TEFLologists. Is it better to focus on form or to focus on forms? That's a question for TEFLologists. If you use a textbook, is your classroom authentic, or should your approach be more learner-centric? From feedback to learner autonomy, we'll discuss it all on TEFLology.
Welcome to the TEFLology Podcast, a podcast all about teaching English as a foreign language and related matters. In this episode, we present an interview with Denise Murray. Denise is currently a professor in TESOL at Anaheim University, California, as well as an emeritus professor at Macquarie University in Australia. She was also the president of TESOL from 1996 to 1997. Denise has numerous articles and books to her name and is particularly renowned in the areas of computer-mediated communication and computer-assisted language learning. Some of her works include the co-authored What English Language Teachers Need to Know series and 2009's Leadership in English Language Education, Theoretical Foundations and Practical Skills for Changing Times. Rob sat down with Denise and asked her questions about the impact of computers on the English language teaching profession and learning.
Okay, so this is Rob, and I'm sitting here with Dr. Denise Murray from Anaheim University. Thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast.
My pleasure.
So you've done a lot of work on computer-mediated communication, ICT and ELT. I think your first work on it appeared back in the late 1980s.
That's right, yes.
How did you get involved in that area?
Well, it's a long story. I was doing my doctorate, and Shirley Bryce Heath, who was my supervisor, had us do a little mini ethnography in our own family environment or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I was doing it in this neighborhood, and then I chose my husband as the subject. And I was taking down notes about what we were saying to each other and other people who'd come into the house and so on. And one night he was in the study, and he was working away on the computer because he was in the high-tech industry. He worked for IBM. And I looked over his shoulder and I said, "What on earth is that?" Because I could see something skimming across the screen, and then he would type, and then something else. He said, I'm messaging to a friend of ours. I won't use the name. And I said, "Oh, can you tell me more about that?" So, later he explained to me, and they were the days where that was because he was IBM, and everybody on this network were all IBM, as it was totally proprietary. And they were doing email, but they also had this one line that they could do, which used to be used to send a command to the operator in the huge computer room to mount a tape because they needed whatever the data was on the tape. Mm. And I said, well, look, I'd really love to look at some of these conversations and analyze them, just for this little study. So he asked a couple of his friends, who he worked with, would it be okay if I had a look at it, because this is proprietary stuff and stuff. So when I did the report, I sort of focused a little bit on that because it was just sort of fascinating to me. And Shirley Bryce Heath said, "You've got a dissertation topic." And I said, "Oh, I wasn't thinking about it." She said, "Oh, this is absolutely groundbreaking because nobody's done a linguistic analysis of it." That's how it happened. Purely serendipitous.
Nice. And so you're still researching and writing on this topic until... I'm
not doing anything much really on computer-mediated communication. I'm mainly doing online language teacher education.
Right.
Marianne Christensen and I have just finished a really big survey where we've got, I've forgotten, 300 and something or other teachers and teacher students. And then we're analysing that data at the moment. So I've been working more in that area more recently, but it's sort of the next iteration of what I did before.
Right. So maybe that connects to my question. What changes have you seen over your career in terms of technology in the classroom?
Well, unbelievable. From the first classes that I saw using technology, they were in a computer lab, big computers, and there were, floppy disks. and the students would put the floppy disk in, and there were some exercises. It was mostly drill, it was mostly grammar drill, but there were some that were done in the early days that were a bit more creative with sort of clothes and things like that, and some games. But they were all totally non-interactive in how we would use the word interactive today. And I still make a distinction between interaction and interactive. You know, if you have an online program that that is meant to be the tutor teaching learners language, that's not interactive. You only that is interact. You can make it interactive, but it's not interaction. Real interaction is only between people, which is where computer-mediated communication comes in, and why it sort of grabbed my attention, because it is real communication between real people trying to convey messages to each other.
Right. So I guess in that sense there's a difference between technology for classroom language teaching and technology for autonomous language learning.
Right. Yes. Right.
What kind of differences would you see there?
Well, a lot of the call stuff now is getting to be far more interactive than it was, and there are people in Europe in particular who are investigating iCall, intelligent call. But again, it's mostly now at the grammar level, because that's all we're able to analyze. I mean, it can listen to speech, and we do have both speech recognition and speech synthesis. But we don't have yet artificial intelligence, and that's been a dream. I mean, when I was studying at Stanford in the early 60s, I used to go to the Center for Language, and forgotten what the I stood for now, but it was philosophers, computer scientists. It was not anything to do with education. But people like Terry Winograd, the first one to develop an AI program, was there. He was actually on my committee. And people were then saying, oh, AI is just around the corner, another 5 years. Right? We're now 30 years on, and AI is still a dream. I mean, we've got bits of AI, in the sort of robots and the machines that now can learn from the mistakes you make and the things you do over and over again. But it's not AI in the sense that we've always wanted to use it, which is replicating true human interaction. Because modeling the semantics of that have been just so difficult. So difficult.
Right.
The model of grammar is relatively straightforward, but actually modeling and finding a linguistic model that actually works for semantics is really, and for pragmatics.
Right. So I guess if computers can learn to react to people as they work with the program, I guess that could build up a kind of an individual language learning program?
It could build up a profile of the areas that you need to work on and give you, direct you to practice to do the areas that you need more practice on. Yes, and that's possible today.
Right. And do you think that that's something that's going to become more or a bigger part of language learning in the future?
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. I mean, anything where learners are, engaged. I mean, I think they're more likely to do things that are more gamey, in that motivates more than things that are too language focused, and so people are trying to meld those two more together. But if you look online at a lot of these websites of people who are English language teachers, and they have their own website, and they're supposedly teaching English, still an awful lot of it is just drill, and the feedback is really, a lot of it is very, very poor. It's yes, no, and things like that, and not even explaining why the yes answer is right and why the no answer is wrong. So people are trying to do new things, and certainly those people in iCall are trying to do it. But I think that people are now using technology more in the sense of using the applications that are around, like Facebook and Twitter and so on, to interact with real people.
Okay. Well, that leads nicely on actually to the next question. So you've written about L2 literacies and their relation to ICT. What kind of literacies do you think are required for learners to operate in an increasingly digital world, and how does that impact the classroom, do you think?
Well, I think let me start with the second. It impacts the classroom in that we really need to not assume that digital natives know how to do everything, or assume that everybody in our class is a digital native. I mean, that research that I quoted today says that Japanese students prefer to use their smartphones for everything. But as instructors, we need to inform them that, well, that's going to be very, very difficult if you're going to write a 20-page report on something that you history, geography, whatever it is that we're asking you to do. So I do worry about the young people only wanting to use the technologies that they feel comfortable with, that aren't necessarily best suited for them to be able to do some of the tasks that are required in school. You can do a lot of things on a smartphone. I mean, certainly, with voice recognition now, they can talk into the phone, they can hear back if they're actually saying it correctly and all those things. I mean, there's a lot that can now go onto a smartphone, and the memory capability and everything is greater than those big mainframes I was talking about in the early 80s. So what was the first part of the question?
The first part was what literacies are required for learners these days.
Well, I still think that from my experience, young people don't always navigate very well. They do a Google search, and if it's not the first two, they just give up. They still don't know how to refine their searches, how to quickly scan a search result to be able to decide what is going to be the most appropriate. And given the algorithms that Google uses, many times it's sort of forcing them to make certain choices because the algorithm is leading them to whatever the top three are. I mean, it isn't just the number of hits. I mean, Google does have a very complicated algorithm. But it is an algorithm. And the other really difficult thing is there is just so much out there. The students are doing a project, for example, in an English class, and they have to go and get data for it. Maybe they're researching how to, California, for example, which is where I live. They can find so much out there, but is it necessarily going to be accurate? How do they identify what are authentic sites? I remember one situation where somebody was looking up Australian animals and found this fabulous website, and it was within the language ability. It was within the kids are adults language ability, but it was in fact a website of an elementary school.
Right.
So maybe the teacher had actually supervised and everything in there was accurate, but I'd be a bit worried about necessarily believing everything that was in an elementary school child's report. Then the other one is that often the language is so difficult. You send them, you say, okay, well, do a search and find more. Well, they'll do it anyway, whether you ask them to or not. They'd much rather do that than go to a library. And it's not just how authentic it is, it's the language at a level that they can read it. No, they can't. So what do? They copy and paste. And the copy and paste syndrome has just absolutely proliferated and escalated as a result of, those, mainly the second reason, that the students can't understand it, and somebody said it, so it's got to be the best thing, so I'll just cut and paste it.
Yeah, students often say, how did you know that I didn't write that sentence? Well, because I don't think you know the word eschatological, for example.
Right, yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, you're right. They're absolutely surprised when teachers say to them, this isn't all your own work. And often they cut and paste and put bits of themselves in between, and then it's even more obvious that that's the case.
Right.
And if we're particularly looking at, say, students, we're preparing them to go into universities and study, that isn't acceptable, and they've got to learn to read material, synthesize it, analyze it, and make it their own. And that's the skill that they're almost seduced into not doing anymore, because it is so easy just to find this stuff and dump it.
Is that something that maybe could be included more on teacher training courses? Because I was never taught about any of these issues during any of my teacher training, but it is something that I've come across as a teacher now. So awareness raising, I guess, of these issues, something that you think could be included on those courses?
Yes, in fact, there is a book going to come out in, I don't know, probably next year it will be, on should there be a core class in, some sort of TESOL programs. And I've contributed the final chapter that sort of summarizes it, and it's got some wonderful chapters from all the sort of movers and shakers in the call area, and talking about the courses that they have in their institutions and what they include. And my argument actually in that is you've got to be very careful what you include in your curriculum for that, because if all you're doing is showing the teachers all of the wonderful tools that they've got and all the new technologies, you've got a wearable watch and this is what you can do with it, or there's this wonderful language teaching or learning program, or there's this GoToMeeting, which is what we use at Anaheim. In 2 years' time, that technology will be totally different, and so you've somehow or other got to create a core course that brings up all the issues, not just how to use the current technology, because by tomorrow virtual reality is going to be here. What are you going to do with that? And just learning how to use a digital watch for teaching, or a GoPro camera is not really going to. Yes, you need to know how to use it, but you need bigger skills than that. It's like in all teacher education programs, you need some sort of theoretical background where you need sort of the big pictures, and the literacy one is one, the access, who's got access to what of the technology, because you might be really gung-ho about everything that comes out you go out and buy, but does that mean all the learners in your class have it? Japan is very highly technology oriented, so it's more likely here. But I can guarantee that there are going to be some kids who, either because of their family or their own inclinations, not everybody is sort of keen on the technology, and all of the issues of privacy. If you're using Facebook and things like that, privacy issues are huge. And students use them without the knowledge of, how they might be actually setting themselves up for some bad things.
Right. Today in your talk, you were talking about the generation gap in terms of technology. You've touched on it a little already, but how do you think that teachers, or perhaps the field itself, can go about addressing the gap in knowledge of technology between teachers and learners?
That's a really difficult question. I think for teachers, I think being, experts at technology doesn't have to be part of their toolbox. If an institution wants to really use, online learning in a big way, then it needs to provide the professional development for teachers, but it also needs to have technical support available in the institution. And this survey of online language teacher education programs that Marianne and I have just done, it's clear that in many of them there is really good technical support, and then everything sort of moves nice and smoothly. But the teachers still all reported that the students ask them for help, the technology help. And so, if the teachers don't have those skills, they need to know where the students can go to find the skills, because the students themselves need to be orientated to it. It seemed that in this situation, because these are online programs, some of them were blended, not all totally online, almost all of them had some sort of tutorial that was, a PowerPoint presentation or something showing students how to use the particular learning management system used there. But this is, remember, teacher education. This isn't for teaching English as a language.
Right, right.
But that gap's always going to be there. Until we have a younger teaching force. And hopefully we've got more young people coming into teaching. Would be nice, and then they can tutor the other teachers.
Right.
But you can learn from your students. I mean, I mostly learned from students because they knew more about a lot of the technology than I did.
Right. The teacher becomes the student, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, I always feel that you learn from your students, not just about technology, but their contexts of learning are different from yours. So. They see things in the world differently from what you do. They overhear some conversation, they bring it to the class and say, I heard this the other day. What on earth does this mean? Were these people angry the way they were talking because they sounded really loud and angry? I mean, they bring those sorts of things to the classroom. And you as a teacher learn from it.
Right. Technology is often talked about in terms of, connected to motivation as like a motivating force. So do you think that technology does have a big impact on learner motivation? And if it does, is there a way that can be harnessed by teachers?
The research is sort of all over the place. I mean, a lot of it, yes, it shows that they are motivated using it. But also, now with smartphones and tablets being so ubiquitous, a lot of our people are finding quite the opposite, that it's actually distracting. And you could see that, you've been here all day, haven't you?
Most of the day.
Right. David Noonan did a very good session about a big project he's doing in Vietnam and Korea. And the kids are in these pods with tablets, and they're supposed to be doing certain drills and things, but the tablet is so enticing that this one kid, where the camera was focused on him, he was doing all manner of other things as well as supposedly taking part in the lesson.
Right.
And there is this myth that people can multitask. And there's been some very recent research from psychologists who've studied it in depth, and we do not multitask. What we do is we microsecond change from one task to the other. And what they discovered, that if you do that, you actually are less efficient than if you did one task, finished it, and moved to the next task, did it, and finished it. So this whole idea that I can sit here and I can text my friend while I'm, writing a paper, in another window for a class, is less efficient than if you turned your phone off, or only did the work you're supposed to be doing for the class, then did all the texting and everything else afterwards.
Right.
And the same with, if they're supposedly you can text and watch a movie. Well, it turns out that you can't. While you're texting, you're missing something on the movie. So that's one of the things we've really got to get that research out amongst teachers, because it's not even in our field that it came up. It was, psychologists who did some really big studies that multitasking just is a myth.
So I guess it's up to teachers to kind of control the way that technology is used, in a sense, to make sure that it's not distracting from everything else.
Right.
Is it kind of would you say it's a disruptive technology in that sense?
It can be. It can be. But that also means, because it's enticing and you want students to do their own thing, that you've got to give space and time for that to happen.
Right.
And for them to explore and make mistakes. But the teachers in my own classes, I just hear more and more from them that they have to tell students to just turn their phones off.
Okay. Yeah, I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
So, over the last few years, you co-authored a series of books with Marianne Christensen about called "What Language Teachers Need to Know." I think there's three volumes. So those books are not specifically about ICT and that kind of thing.
No.
But what do you think is the most important thing that English language teachers need to know about technology and language teaching? If you had to choose one point.
Whoa. That it is a tool for the teacher, and that ultimately it's the curriculum that drives what you do in the classroom, and you use the technology if that will facilitate whatever you're doing in the classroom. It's the same as, chalk is a technology, but you didn't write every single thing on the chalkboard. So, why would you use technology for everything just because it's there? So the first thing is, what is the objective of the curriculum that I am trying to achieve in this lesson? And what are the tools I want to use? And the tools may be technology-based, they may not be. And the technology could be, listening, could be audio, could be, some televised pictures. It could be reading a hard print text of some sort. It just depends what the curriculum objectives are. But that's the one thing, and that's not just for technology, that's for everything we do in the classroom. We have to keep in mind what the curriculum objective is. Now that doesn't mean that we can't go off on tangents if suddenly some learning opportunity comes up that becomes a teaching opportunity. I'll give you one example that's really bad and sad. There's a program in California called Reading Readiness for learners who have both ESL and non-ESL who are having problems reading. And it's very phonics based, and it's very scripted. And the teacher has to go through a learning program to use it, and they must follow the script. And one of my students was observing this class to report back. And the teacher said to the kid, it's a one-on-one tutoring situation, said to the kid, what happened to you yesterday? It's a very typical teaching opening. And the kid said, my dog died. And the teacher said, oh, and then moved on.
Right.
Now, that, to me, is one of these teaching moments, This is a kid who's having trouble reading. Why not go into, finding out more about the dog, have the kid writing about it, and then reading what they've written themselves. I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity, because the kid, obviously, that was the first, reading was not in his brain that moment. He wanted to talk about his dog. And it's a great opportunity, but if you miss that, so although I said, the objective is really important, to miss opportunities that students give you is really an absolutely missed learning opportunity for the whole class.
Okay, all right. And perhaps one final question. Do you think that technology is going to make teachers obsolete in the future?
I can't imagine it. Because, until we have AI, that's not going to be possible. And that's one of the things that really bugs me about online learning. I mean, there are so many of these institutions that set themselves up, I'll have this program, you can learn with that, and, we don't need any teachers, it's going to be a lot cheaper. Well, first of all, the money investment into the product is huge. And learners still need feedback, and that's the piece we don't yet have really done very well. Now, you can do some limited ones online, absolutely. And, there are some really good things out there so that, students can learn by themselves. But first of all, it takes a special learner who doesn't care about interacting with human beings to do this, and it will work for, a certain sort of small set of language learning activities. But ultimately, human beings want to communicate to other human beings. And if there's a curriculum, it's really hard. I've been involved as a consultant on projects that have tried to develop First of all, it was discs and everything to an online program, and some of them are quite good, but they've all got their limitations. They usually have to be in a small set of the language that you're trying to teach. You miss the serendipitous things that the student brings up as well. I just think that life is unexpected, and it's the unexpected that I find fascinating. So to lose that, I would find very sad.
I think I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's a nice place to end it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
So thanks a lot for listening today, and we'd also like to say a huge thank you to Denise Murray for her time. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can send us an email at TEFLology@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter @TEFLology, like us on Facebook, rate or review us on iTunes, and check out our website TEFLology-podcast.com, which contains all of our previous episodes. Okay, so we'll be back with a regular episode soon.